This evening's candidate forum featuring candidates for the Santa Clara City Clerk's position. My name is Gloria Chun-Hu. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters and a moderator for this evening's forum. We have one other candidate who has told us he is coming. If he does show up, we'll just put him at the end. I just want to say that this forum tonight is co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of San Jose, Santa Clara. The League is a nonpartisan organization, nonprofit as well, of both women and men. And the League was started nearly 100 years ago to promote political responsibility through informed, active participation in government. By being nonpartisan, that means we never support or oppose any political candidate or any party. We do, however, while we do not endorse any political candidates, we do often take positions. Mr. Sampoulos, we've got a seat for you at the very end. And we do take positions after careful study on political issues such as ballot measures. The League invites anyone who's interested in government, politics, and serving the community to join us, and we have members of the League who are here who can answer any questions you may have about the League. I want to thank you for being here. It's important for you to know who the candidates are, what their issues are, and what they think, and what makes them good candidates. The format for tonight's format will be as follows. Each candidate will have a 1-minute opening statement. Next, the candidates will respond to questions from you, our audience. So you should all have cards, white cards. If you need them, please raise your hand. We have students from Presentation High School as well as volunteers who will be collecting them and passing them out. Each of the candidates has received the rules for how we're operating tonight. I will, as moderator, make any final determination as to whether and how a question is asked. And we have members, volunteers from the League who will be vetting all of the questions. Any questions that you propose must be prepared so that all candidates will be able to answer them and not directed at any one candidate. And in this day and age when sometimes there are less than civil discussions, we urge you to think about questions that will help you make decisions and also to be as civil as possible. Questions will be sorted by the League members to avoid duplication, to broaden any questions that are specifically addressed, and to eliminate any that might be perceived as inappropriate. If you feel that your question has been misinterpreted by the slaughters or by the speakers, please submit another. However, because of limitations, and this will end at about 7:25 as we have another forum coming up for the mayoral position, please note that we will try to get as many questions as possible. In addition to having a 1-minute opening, each candidate will have a 30-second closing statement, and each of them will have a green rebuttal card. So you may use that to rebut at any time, out of order, or you may use them at the end of the evening as part of your closing statement. In addition to questions, we will possibly have some lightning rod questions that will require yes or no. That will be a very quick response, not a 30-second or minute. Now, in the interest of time and decorum, I ask our audience to hold all applause until the end of the forum, and now is a very good time for you to silence your cell phones. I'd like to introduce the candidates who are running for Santa Clara City Council, and I will note that one candidate is not able to join us today. But they also took a minute before we started to draw, so they are randomly seated against the numbers that they picked. Left to right, Tom McDermott, Peter Roberts, Robert O'Keefe, Hossam Haggag, and Christopher Stampoulos. Now, let us begin with the 1-minute opening statement, and we'll start with you, Mr. McDermott.
Hi, I'm Thomas McDevitt. I'm running for City Clerk. City Clerk, the position here in Santa Clara is an elected position. I feel that's very important. City Clerk's main duties right now is to administer elections. I feel that an impartial City Clerk is the best way we can make sure that we have fair elections. One of the problems that we have right now as a city in this position is communication. You probably all received, like I did, a nice 4-page glossy statement telling us about our different districts and when we're all going to vote for basically people in those districts. There was some wrong information in there. Basically, when it talked about when the city clerk runs, basically the city clerk is going to run again in 2020 for a 4-year term. And the way this thing was played out, it basically made it appear that only the chief of police is. So basically, I'm here to run for city clerk in order to make sure we can get accurate information out to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts?
G'day. Thank you to the League of Women's Voters for having this forum tonight. I'm going to use my minute to tell you a little bit more about me. I've lived in the city for 16 years. I've been in Silicon Valley for 18 years. I've brought my kids up here. I live and I work here. I've been involved in a lot of community activities, especially through my kids' school, through parent boards and PTA. I've also been on the Santa Clara Unified School District Bond Oversight Committee. I run a 501c3 called Play It Again Santa Clara, where I recycle musical instruments and pass them on to kids who need them. I also volunteer at the library through a retro tech program. As you can see, I'm involved in community, and I think the city clerk position is definitely one that needs to be someone from the community. It's an important part of the community in getting residents involved in voting, because after all, that's the major portion of the job of city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, your comments.
Thank you, and thank you for all for coming. I'm Robert O'Keefe, candidate for city clerk. I was born and raised in Santa Clara. I attended local schools, grammar school through college. My wife, Lori, and I both love living in Santa Clara, and we have no plans to leave. I recently retired from the California Highway Patrol after 30 years of service. I attained the rank of lieutenant and commanded patrol operations in San Francisco and San Mateo counties. I am active in my neighborhood and throughout the greater Santa Clara community. I have served on 2 city subcommittees, and just today I was honored with the endorsements of the Santa Clara Police Officers Association and the Santa Clara City Firefighters Local 1171. The duties of the city clerk have recently changed, with the greatest responsibility being that of the elections official. I believe this position needs to be non-political, non-partisan, and service-oriented, ensuring true democracy and transparency in all our municipal elections. My entire career has been dedicated to public service, and I still wish to serve. I have proven leadership skills, vast government experience, and I look forward to answering your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haggab?
It's really good to see you guys from this side. I've been, obviously, many of you know me from my videos. My name is Hussam Haggag, and I'm running to be your next Santa Clara City Clerk. And I really think when you look at the people who are running, the best indication of someone's ability to serve as the next city clerk is to really look at what they've done in the past. And I have the most comprehensive track record of serving all of you over the last 7 years as your fellow resident. Over the last several years, I served 2 volunteer terms on the city's Charter Review Committee where we passed council term limits and protection of our open spaces. I hosted 3 town hall meetings on my own as a volunteer resident with our mayor and vice mayor to hold them accountable for things in the city. I've increased transparency at City Hall by video live streaming. You see all the live streaming cameras up. City meetings and events, over 250 videos on my Facebook page with 125,000 views. And I have been your fellow resident and tireless advocate. By standing up for Santa Clarans against backroom deals and money, I'd be honored to earn your vote as your next city clerk.
Thank you. Mr. Stampolis?
Thank you. My name's Chris Stampolis. Grew up in Los Angeles and moved here to Santa Clara 35 years ago at the age of 17 to attend Santa Clara University. Achieved both my bachelor's as well as my master's degree over at SCU, and over those past 35 years have made this my home. During that time, I've been honored to serve you 12 years as an elected official, 8 years on the college board, including 4 years on the state board, 4 years as one of your school board trustees, served you for 6 years as a planning commissioner, 4 years as a historical and landmarks commissioner, chaired the Citizens Advisory Committee for 3 years. Little League president here in town for a couple years, PTA president, a school site council president. But it's one thing to have a resume where you show that somebody has been involved in the community for a very long time. I see the city clerk as being the chief transparency officer, and it's our job to go beyond the minimum of simply posting the meetings that are required, but to also bring in information from the rest of the city. We'll talk more about that as the debate goes on. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll start with questions. I do want to point out that there is another candidate who has chosen not to be here, and her name will be on the ballot, and that is Roseanne LaCourcier, but she has chosen not to be here tonight. I also want to point out, obviously, we have timers, and I will be mixing the order in which the questions will be asked, okay? Just so that we don't have you all responding after the same person or in front of the same person. So in this next question, we'll start with Ms. Roberts, then Mr. Hagag, then Mr. McDermott, and then Mr. Stampoulos, and then Mr. O'Keefe. Okay? So the question is rather long, but it's a good one. Since the role of the city clerk is dealing with a lot of paperwork, how familiar are you with the rules regarding the Brown Act, sunset laws, public accountability? Not only how familiar are you with it, but where and how did you get this background that will indicate you're familiar with the rules that would govern the city and the job as city clerk? So we'll start with you, Ms. Roberts.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. How familiar are you with the laws regarding the Brown Act, sunset laws, public accountability? And if so, if you are familiar with them, where and how did you get this background information? Because these are all laws which would affect the job of the city clerk.
Sure, I'd be pleased to answer that. Let's start with the Brown Act and public accountability. I was president of my HOA for 2 years, and I was a member of my HOA for another 6 years. And through that, we did training on the Brown Act specifically because the HOA was treated like a corporation. So we had to make sure that we posted our meetings properly, that we gave advance notice, that we only spoke on the agenda about agendized items. Sunset laws, I've actually spent 10 years in government myself. I was with the Attorney General's Department, the Australian Attorney General's Department. I was with the Australian National Audit Office for 5 years as a performance auditor, reporting to Parliament about the efficiency and effectiveness of government programs. So that was the reporting aspect of it. And through those 10 years in government, I've learned a lot about public accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hagag, the same question about background and familiarity with these rules.
At the core of these rules, real quick, I am very familiar with the rules. And at the core of these rules, what these rules really are trying to drive is public accountability and transparency in city government. I served on 2 charter review committees in the last 3 years, where obviously we had to follow very strictly the Brown Act. But at the core, like I was saying about transparency, I have been at nearly every single city council meeting for the last 2.5 years, where I helped push for transparency, and we pushed for and passed a new lobbyist ordinance here to drive more transparency. So when we look at the Brown Act and the sunset laws, those are really, you can look at the bare minimum that a city needs to have to run transparently, to run with integrity. But when you try to expand it, which is what I have been trying to do as your tireless advocate as a resident, is you expand it and you open up more transparency and accountability in the city. And I've done that, and I will continue to do that as your next city clerk.
Thank you. Mr. McDermott?
My name is Thomas McDevitt.
David, I
that's
apologize.
okay.
Thank you for the correction.
That's quite all right. All names are hard when you don't say them all the time, right? Okay, I am familiar with these laws. How am I familiar with these laws? Well, I basically was elected to Washington Open's parent organization as the treasurer. I served on Milliken's and Pomeroy School Site Council. I also, along with Chris, actually I was there a couple years before Chris, but I also was elected to be on the board for Homestead Little League. And these organizations all had to deal with basically reporting and public reporting of their meetings and minutes, especially the money that was involved. So, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Stampoulos.
Thank you. I'm quite familiar with the Brown Act and the California Public Records Act and the bidding transparency rules. not only just as an elected and appointed official, but as a resident, I've filed many requests over the years for access to documents, both here at City Hall as well as through a number of education organizations. As your city clerk, I will improve the forms so that residents more easily can request information. This shouldn't have to be a requirement to wait the maximum number of 10 days for material to be disclosed. Also, as city clerk, I will take information from school site councils, from the school district, both of the school districts that serve us, and all the school site councils, make sure that's also posted on our website, because that's where the financial decisions are made at the local level. We need to be working with multilingual and multicultural outreach so that our residents know how to get information, and that as city clerk, I'll make a very strong effort to train people from senior citizens all the way down to young people.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe?
Thank you. As far as the Brown Act, I'm very familiar with the Brown Act. I mentioned earlier my career on the Highway Patrol and management in the Highway Patrol. The Brown Act is for all public agencies that hold open public meetings. Several of the commissions I was on the Highway Patrol, the boards and actual meetings of the Highway Patrol itself were under the Brown Act, so I'm very familiar with it. It's intended for public agencies, notification, and how the transparency, how the group can actually meet. The public accountability, the Public Records Act is there just for the same reason. They're all part of the California Voter Rights Act, and they're actually state law that accesses the information, how the information is accessible to the public and shall be given to the public.
Thank you. We have an interesting question. I believe the city clerk job does not pay very much. How will you cope with this? And we'll have you answer this. We'll start with you, Mr. O'Keefe, then Mr. McDivitt, then Ms. Roberts, then Mr. Hagag, and then Mr. Stampolis. So to the question of the pay.
Yeah, I think I have it. Thank you. As far as the city clerk, as I mentioned earlier, the role has recently changed. Council, it was a full-time elected city employee position with a pension and vacation and all the benefits. Now it's a stipend paid every month and you're no longer a city employee. I am, as I said, happily retired, and I have the time that's dedicated, because a lot of time will be dedicated, need to be dedicated to the position as it is. So the stipend's fine. They can even less. I don't care. But I will be willing to put the time in to get the work done every day if need be. Thank you.
Mr. McDivitt, same question.
So the amount of money that the city clerk gets for this position is the exact same amount of money that a council member gets for their position. If the council can handle it, I can handle it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Peters, Ms. Roberts.
The amount that the city clerk gets, it may be small, but it is a part-time job. Admittedly, it'd be a full-time job around election time and not so part-time when it's not election time. I do have my own job and my own business, so I'm happily employed in a very flexible way. So that's the way I'd treat the job, flexibly, and I've also got other income as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hagag.
Well, once we figure out how to get these mics on. Really, when I look at this, the role of the city clerk is really a service-oriented role. It's not a role where somebody really should be, especially when it's elected, it's not one where somebody should be making the money that is coming from our own tax dollars. This is a service-oriented role, and I'm running to be your elected representative. Quite honestly, I'm already doing 3 full-time jobs. I have a regular job in the tech sector. I'm a husband and father to 3 beautiful young girls who are in the back there, and they're waving. And my 3rd job really is that I come here and I'm serving you as a volunteer, probably already 30 to 40 hours a week as a volunteer here, coming to all the city council meetings, live streaming them, serving on committees, showing up to extracurricular committees that are, assigned, ad hoc committees by the council, and really representing the voice of the people, having on my Facebook page over 900 followers that are all Santa Clarans that communicate amongst each other, but also I share their concerns in the meetings. So I see that as 3 full-time jobs, and this is a service role, so I'm okay with the low pay.
Thank you. Mrs. Stampolis?
Sure. Slightly different perspective in that the position for city clerk has been actually a full-time job for as long as anybody who's alive here can remember. And when the filing period opened for the city clerk, it was still a full-time job. It was not until after filing opened that council has made an attempt to make some changes. So frankly, I actually disagree with the fact that we're shifting necessarily to a part-time job. If it does turn out to be, at the end of the day, a stipend, that's fine. We'll go ahead and get interns in there. We'll make sure that the office still runs in a way that may not be as accessible as it has been for folks, but we'll have plenty of people that are there to serve the public. I've been a 12-year elected official. I know what it's like to do the work and only get a stipend. But having said that, the city charter still structures this quite differently than council has attempted to make the change. And I think there's a lot of discussion that still needs to happen about how do we make sure that the charter is enacted, which puts a lot of responsibility on the clerk and which has not changed, while at the same time, theoretically, we're now asking that person to do it for free.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a very sensitive kind of an issue. We'll do it in this order. Mr. McDevitt, then Ms. Roberts, then Mr. Stampolis, Mr. O'Keefe, and then Mr. Hagag. And the question is, how should the city clerk act or respond and interact with council members if there is an issue that's very controversial, perhaps, and being handled incorrectly or unethically? Boy, that's a real sensitive one. So, shall I read it again? What should the city clerk do, and how should he or she interact with council members if there is an issue on the city council agenda that is being handled incorrectly or unethically? And I guess the question is, what would you do if you were the city clerk, and how would you respond? Mr. McDevitt.
So this issue, if it deals with the elections or the seal of the city, then the city clerk needs to respond in that capacity. If it doesn't, then I would respond as any citizen should. So how would I handle it if it was an election issue? Well, an unethical election issue is very disturbing, and it would have to be reported to, I believe, the county and the state in order to their agencies in order to handle that, probably also the city attorney. If it's not an election issue, and then I would have to respond as a citizen, because currently the city clerk is only in charge of administering elections and maintaining the seal of the city.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts?
I'd like to say that the city clerk position is not beholden to the city council members. The city clerk position is elected and is responsible to the people of Santa Clara, to the residents of Santa Clara. If something was handled unethically, if the council members were handling something unethically, I would be duty-bound to report it to the city attorney to get advice about how to act. I would look at the charter and make sure I acted ethically within the charter boundaries. As well as that, I've had experience in this before. I was an auditor for the Australian National Audit Office. And when you're an auditor, you have to call it like you see it. And then you have to report it to Parliament. I was in the Senate for a few months as well. And there you have to report things as you see them. There is no putting frosting on top of it. So I would act directly and ethically to get that situation resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stampolis?
Much of this is about having a city clerk who can anticipate what potential problems could arise and making sure that proper training is provided to city council members as well as to all the appointed commissioners way in advance so that everybody really understands and that the public has access to that information as well. For example, there's a form called the Form 700 that elected officials and some city staff and most commissioners have to fill out to disclose. We need to make sure that everybody is very well trained so there's no question that people don't know how to do it. If it turns out there's an error, what I would do is first go to the person who submitted the form and just simply ask the question, are you sure this is the way that you want to have this submitted? Might you want to consider an amendment? We're not enemies with our elected officials or with our appointed officials. I also would be having ongoing discussions with the city manager, who's really the chief executive officer of the city, to make sure that that person is always aware of the concern. And we figure out some ways to make sure that proper disclosures are made, not in a way that washes over a mistake, If there has to just be a public amendment, you'll have the original filed paperwork, and then you'll have the amendment posted next to it as well. I'll be a team member.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you. The question actually comes down, I can only answer for me. It comes down to one's moral and ethical standards. I've set my moral and ethical standards very high. Honesty, fairness, integrity, professionalism. So if something comes to perception of an impropriety by anybody, an elected official, a candidate who's going to the city clerk's office, or any role that the city clerk oversees, first of all, I would have to look at each individual issue and see if it is a conflict of interest, an impropriety, or unethical. Once that decision's made, I will make the proper notifications, maybe the city attorney, maybe the council itself, but I report to you, the voting public. If it needs to be public, it will be public as soon as I know what it is and confirm what it is.
Thank you. Mr. Haggad?
When I served on the Charter Review Committee, one of the questions that came up was, should we continue to elect our city clerk or should it move to an appointed position? And I fought very hard in that Charter Review Committee to keep our city clerk elected so that they answer to the people and that they do not answer to the mayor, the council, or the city manager. And with that, the city clerk's role is one of a watchdog over what happens at City Hall. You know, when we talk about the city clerk, and what I want to do is bringing transparency and really amplifying the transparency that I've done with my live streaming. When you have transparency that builds trust with the community, and as I've written in my ballot statement that you've all received in the mail, that I will ruthlessly enforce the lobbyist ordinance and the dark money ordinance in Santa Clara, which we've already had violations of and were not enforced. And finally, as an official duty of the city clerk, they are the keeper of the seal, which puts them as a firewall of unethical and illegal contracts, and I will go to the extent of withholding the seal on any unethical contract that the city has.
Thank you. We'll move toward a less controversial or less difficult question, I think, somewhat. Based upon your view, we'd like to know a person, current or past, in public service that you admire, and why. We'll start with you, Mr. Haggad, and then Mr. Stampoulos, Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. McDivitt, and then Ms. Roberts. So, Mr. Haggad. Name a person, current or past, in public service that you admire, and why do you admire that person?
Two heroes of mine, one from the past and one from the present. From the past, Malcolm X. He was not an elected official, but he is a true story of somebody who came from, what can you say, a very unfortunate background and rose up to serve his people, to serve all of us, and he paid the ultimate price with his life for it. The second person who is alive today is Senator Bernie Sanders, who with his, you can see the passion and the honesty and the truthfulness, whether you agree with him on his policy positions or not, you know that his heart is in the right place, that he's there to serve the people and not special interests. And I'm very proud that you'll see on all of my materials that I have written paid for by Hussam Haggag for city clerk, not by special interests. And I have vowed, and I've said this in my campaign statement, my ballot statement, that I am not taking any corporate donations, and my average donation is $140, and I'm very proud of that.
Thank you. Mr. Stampoulos?
Sure. Two people. First, I'm going to mention Congress member Zoe Lofgren. Zoe, back many years ago, made a strong effort to appoint young people to commission positions at the county level when she was still a county supervisor. And I was graced enough to be one of her appointees to the County Justice Systems Advisory Board. It's how I had a chance to kind of get involved with service on the public side of government. I've seen throughout her career, both at the supervisor level and now as a Congress member, she's been very courageous in fighting for the rights of those folks who don't necessarily have the power to speak up for themselves. Been a strong advocate, especially for immigrant rights and for those who are working people. The other person would be Governor Jerry Brown. Jerry has worked his way up from local office to state office, back down, back up again. And I think regardless of whether you agree with everything that Jerry has done, he told me two things. One, find a city, get involved, Chris, and make a difference in where you live. And secondly, watching, he is not afraid to cast vetoes and to tell legislators when he doesn't agree. So he, I think, judiciously exercises power for the good of the people as he sees it, but in general, he also wants to work with folks to make things better.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe?
It's a person from the past. It's Franklin Roosevelt. He led this country through one of our darkest times, championing democracy, when nobody really wanted to be involved in a European war. It was very unpopular, but things that needed to be done. And we all know how challenged he was in his personal life with disabilities that we cannot even imagine the extent of those. So somebody who true public service and was committed and was not left or right, but was just there to lead the country at a time. I would say the biggest person that had influence on me would be Franklin Roosevelt.
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt?
So I'm a history major, and I've already quoted John Adams at one of these forums. But just a quick aside, Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, the internment of the Japanese, and for that reason, he's not my hero. That was one of the biggest travesties our country's ever done. My current hero actually is also a president, though. It's Jimmy Carter. I still remember the day that my parents were crying on election night because he lost his election. I think that he was a true giving person. The amount of stuff he's done since he's left office is enormous and incredible, and he's very inspiring. And so I would say Jimmy Carter is who I look to.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts?
Sure. The person I admire most, one of the leaders I look up to, you probably haven't heard of him. His name is David Lange. He was president of New Zealand in the 80s. He came from a very ordinary background, and with his smarts and with hard work, he achieved a lot. He was a really good organiser. He was a community organiser. He was a fantastic public speaker. He could speak for hours on any topic because he was so schooled and because he studied a lot and worked hard. He steered New Zealand through a really tragic period. There was a big monetary crisis in Australia and New Zealand at the time, and he steered New Zealand through that. He kept defence spending at a conservative level. He never put New Zealand in the red. And he was very ethical, and that's why I admire David Lange. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, again, looking at personal qualities of each of you. And we'll start with, the question is, can you relate on one incident in your public or professional life in the past of which you are especially proud? I guess it would be one accomplishment or one activity in your personal or professional life. And we'll start with Mr. Stampoulos, then Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. Haggag, Ms. Roberts, and then Mr. McDevitt. So can you relate one incident or one accomplishment in your public or professional life of which you are especially proud?
Sure, I'll do two real quick. As a school board trustee, I'm very proud to have made the motion to set the standard in Santa Clara so that all students default to the college preparatory curriculum. It was an issue that was very contentious over many years, and yet we were still able to get that issue passed, and that was something that I championed. Also glad I made the motion to allocate $1 million out of our new money coming in from Apple so that we would be able to have increased counselors, academic counselors at the secondary school level. Again, that was very controversial. A lot of people were very upset at me that I went ahead and made that motion because it was not so-called going through process, but that meant that we ended up with students benefiting. And lastly, as a planning commissioner, I can remember making a motion here that ended up with extra toddler lots that the developer didn't want to have put in, mostly because we were down to 4 people. It requires 4 people to actually have a vote to pass something. By my voting no, even though it was 3 in favor and 1 opposed, I was able to negotiate for some extra benefits for the children who would live in that community.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe?
The accomplishment I'm most proud of, the date was exactly December 31st, 2014. It's the day I retired from the California Highway Patrol. 34 years ago, I took an oath to defend and protect the people of the state of California. Part of that oath, I swore that I would lay down my life rather than swerve for the path of duty. I believe I've kept that oath all these years, and I am so proud to have served the citizens of California that that is the most recognizable day that I will remember in my life so far. I am ready to take an oath again and serve the city of Santa Clara as your city clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Hagag.
The reason you have 4 cameras here in the audience and the 5th one with the city live stream is because I catalyze live streaming videos here in this city for all of you to watch at home. That's one proud accomplishment. When I was in the Charter Review Committee and we proposed protecting our parks and open spaces from being sold to developers without a vote from the residents, I was the one who proposed that rather than be a simple majority 50% vote, that we make it a 2/3 majority vote so that we could really protect our parks and open spaces. And I was one of the people on the Charter Review Committee that helped push for council term limits for our mayor and our council members to avoid and to put an end to the revolving door politics in our city. And what a lot of people don't know is that a few years ago, I actually pushed and lobbied the council with the support of the Santa Clara Valley Bee Guild and the Master Gardeners Association to change the laws in Santa Clara to allow beekeeping, to make it legal in Santa Clara. And that, aside from the benefits that bees bring, was an example that showed me that grassroots organizing does work.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts.
Yes, thank you. Pardon me. The reason I bring up this accomplishment is because it might be small, but it means a lot to a certain person. And what I do means a lot to a lot of people. So I'm a volunteer at the Central Park City Library as a volunteer to help digitise people's photographs, their slides, their negatives, their audio cassettes. I helped kick off the program a year ago by giving a talk, and I gave a talk this year too, to patrons of the program, which was helping them digitise their photographs and organise. As a personal historian, this meant a lot to me. One young man came in and asked for my help. I gave him help. I tried to put the audio cassette together, and he sat quietly listening to this audio cassette. It turns out it was his father, but his father died just when he was a little boy, and he'd never heard his father's voice before. And he sat in the corner with just tears streaming down his face at the RetroTech program. And I'm very proud of the job that I do at the RetroTech program to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDivitt.
Asking me what one event I'm most proud of is like asking me which one of my children I love more. It's hard to pick. Is it being married with my wife for 24 years? Is it being present for the birth of my 2 children? Is it teaching at Peterson history? I don't know. I think the most proud thing I did, though, was make my parents proud by finally finishing college. It was hard, and it took me 12 years, but I was able to finally do it. And I know that my parents were very proud of me for that, and that probably is my most significant achievement.
Thank you. The next question is getting back to sort of a little difficult, sensitive question, I think. And what is the recourse the public has if the city clerk isn't doing his or her job? Tricky little question there. And we'll go in this order. We'll start with Ms. Roberts, Mr. Hagag, Mr. McDivitt, Mr. Stampoulos, and Mr. O'Keefe. So what is the recourse that the public has if the city clerk isn't doing his or her job?
So the one thing that pops to mind in this space in terms of someone not doing their job is a recall election. So a recall election is for any public official not doing their job. 6 years ago, I was involved in protesting at the Santa Clara Unified School District board members, and we looked very, very much into recalling Mr. Christopher Stampoulos from his position, as well as Ms. Ina Bendis. They were creating havoc, and I didn't think that they were doing their job publicly. So recall, for me, would be an option. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hagag?
That is a very tough question. And I think recall is the easy answer to give, but we all know how monumentally difficult and impossible it is to get a recall to work. We just saw the first recall in a long time with Judge Persky. And to really look at recall as the only option for our residents is really a shame. I think it's very important that the residents pick somebody who has a solid track record, somebody that they're not taking a gamble on, somebody that didn't just show up for the elections, somebody that has proven themselves and served the city and get it right on the first time. Now, I know that may be a cop-out to the answer, but the reality is that residents, without transparency, without the pressure of grassroots organization and movement, nothing can stop an ill-intentioned elected official without the grassroots pressure from the residents. And I've been there. I've seen what it takes to get this hall filled with 500 people to prevent our soccer parks from being sold. And the city council didn't have the votes, but because of that public pressure, we were able to keep it.
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt, same question.
So if any elected official is not behaving the way that you want them to, what recourse do you have? One of PETA, I feel, is absolutely correct. The recall is the way to handle that. However, Hassam's also correct. That is the last resort. Before that, there is something else that you can do. I personally would go talk to that person and find out what, and basically express to them what problems I have. If they blew me off, which has happened to me in the past, then you go to the city council and you bring that problem forward, and so the city council can address it. Because the city council can basically, I believe they very recently censored some of their political people, maybe even in this seat I'm sitting in, that were doing things that they weren't proud of. So that's how I would handle it.
Thank you. Mr. Stampolis?
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt is accurate that it's really about communication. That's the first step. Everybody knows if you've got a major problem with any elected official, of course, you can eventually get to a perspective of recall. But the way I interpret the question is not necessarily something at that level, but if you have a disagreement with the decision that the city clerk has made, that is highly more likely than getting into a huge political issue or, although obviously the other thing too, you can elect a new person the next time around. But as city clerk, I will make sure that a very clear process is set forward so that every resident of Santa Clara and everybody doing business with Santa Clara knows what you do if you disagree with the decision of the city clerk's office. It can be appeals that go to the city attorney. There can be actually eventually going to court. No city clerk should feel personally offended if anybody chooses to use their access to the process to which we all should have an opportunity to go ahead and overturn a decision of the city clerk. It's just business. We can have differences of opinion and at the same time be very open about making sure that people know what the next step is.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe?
Thank you. As everyone said, recall is an option. It does take a lot, as you can see, to do a recall. Unfortunately, just recently, the council had an issue with one of the council members, and it was public pressure that got that person to resign and actually solve the problem of that person being on the council. It didn't solve the problem of what that person allegedly did. I will be open, honest, and transparent. I will have set office hours where any member of the public can come in and talk to me, the assistant city clerk at the same time. I will also lobby the city council members to allow me to have an agendized item at city council meetings where the public can come and ask me questions and I can answer them right then and there. Openness, transparency, and accountability is what I will bring to the table.
Thank you. Because of the time, we have our final question, and the question is having to do with voters and election. What would you do if you were elected city clerk to encourage greater voter turnout? Something the League is also very interested in. And we will have you answer in this order. Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. McDevitt, Ms. Roberts, Mr. Hagag, and then Mr. Stampolis. What would you do as city clerk to encourage greater voter turnout?
Thank you. As a role of city clerk, the city clerk's office had a very active voter program. It was on the website, and many options how to register persons and voters. It was Vote Santa Clara. That has disappeared from the website, just basically telling you go to the voter registrar's office to file. I will bring a program back after discussion with the people to see what the citizens want the city clerk and the city clerk's office to represent the voter registration and the voter process. The more votes, the more voters get engaged, the better our government is. And I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt?
So voter registration and voter turnout are related, but they're different things. Getting more people registered will hopefully lead to more voter turnout. But to specifically get voter turnout, we need people to be engaged with what they're voting on. There's a lot of talk that these midterm elections, we're going to see very low voter turnout because people don't see things that are interesting to them. They only feel the presidential election's interesting to them, when really local elections are what influence us way more than what happens with the president. One thing I would like to do is make sure that basically rides are available. I know that there are several services that provide this, but maybe people don't know about them. Both Lyft and Uber have said they'll give you a free ride to the polling place if you need it. So make sure that people who aren't mobile can get to where they need to be. Make sure that people know what polling station they need to go to. With the new 6 districts that we're going to have, I'm going to rebuttal myself to get 30 more seconds. We have to make sure that people can know what polling station they can get to with these new districts. So, one of my big fears is that this upcoming election, somebody's going to go to their polling spot and they're not going to get the right ballot because of some confusion on which side of the border the district is based on their polling place. And I feel very concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts?
To get people to vote, people have to be interested in the issues. They've got to engage with the issues. They've got to be interested in the positions that are being elected. It comes down, I think, to voter education, more information on the website so that people can find out what the issues are, so that they know who the people are who are coming up for election. They've got to know that. As a podcaster, I think I would put a podcast on this. I'd like to do that where the City of Santa Clara gets to know about the City of Santa Clara through interviews and knowing what different people do, and knowing what the issues are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haggag?
Our city has been changing quite rapidly in a very short amount of time, and I know a lot of people are in pain because of that. Our city just recently changed to district elections, and regardless of how you feel, and although I may be the first minority elected to any office in Santa Clara, I truly believe and that Santa Clarans don't vote for people based on the color of their skin, but based on their qualifications. Who is the most qualified candidate for the job? And I do believe that I am the most qualified. And our city is also changing because it's growing extremely rapidly and the demographics are changing in our city. And I'm very proud to be the first person running for any position in Santa Clara to have lawn signs and campaign material in multiple languages. You'll see some of them outside. You've seen them in your mailers. I have signs in Hindi, I have signs in Chinese, and I have signs in Spanish, because the city needs to work for everybody, not just a select few. And when you engage and make everybody feel like they are part of the city, then they will come out and they will participate more than just a ballot box, but in these chambers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stampoulos.
Well, first, it's about targeting those folks who haven't been voting but are still on the rolls. I mentioned about having a serious team of interns and other folks from the community. We need to go ahead and reach out to the people who consistently have not been voting to find out if they're still alive, if they're there, and then to come up with a strategy to at least keep them in a little better communication when their ballot gets to them. We also need a systematic implementation of multilingual and multi-generational outreach. There are many people in our community who are not as comfortable in English, but they are U.S. citizens. And I believe it's a good use of our government funding to do some outreach systematically to make sure that we're consistently involving those folks in knowing what's going on. With regard to multi-generation, we need to do a much better job of reaching out to our senior citizens, not just through the Senior Center, but through direct outreach. And everybody knows who works with elections. If you can get a young person to vote in 3 consecutive elections at the very beginning of the time when they register to vote, they are highly likely to be every election voters for the rest of their life. I will hit the ground running and be out working with PTAs, school site councils, the high schools, and the middle schools to make sure those young people know they should register and vote.
Thank you. That concludes the question period. We are now ready for your closing statements, and you each have a minute or less. Or you can use your rebuttal card as you choose, except for Mr. McDevitt, who's already used his. So since we started at this end, we will have closing statements starting with Mr. Stampoulos. So it's a minute and 30 seconds, and they're going to tell us at the beginning? If you're going to use your 30 seconds, please wave your card when you get to the end.
Does that bring us to 60 seconds or 90 seconds if we use our card?
If you use your card, it's 90 seconds.
90. Okay. So I'll use my card. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And when I look at even in terms of my generation here in Santa Clara, and again, moving up here as a 17-year-old to go to university at Santa Clara and eventually getting that bachelor's degree in political science and French, and then a master's degree in catechetics in the pastoral ministry department, later on earning a law degree and half of a master's in public administration, which hopefully will get finished up as well. I know that I looked at people like Mayor Eddie Souza, I looked at people like former Mayor Patty Mahan, and the other leaders that we've had here in the community, and realized that it's always been standing on other people's shoulders for vision and for implementation. 100 years ago, our city council decided that they would have electric independence. That decision allowed Santa Clara to become what it is today. We wouldn't have had Intel, we wouldn't have had Motorola, we wouldn't have had all of Silicon Valley here had we not been able to have accessible, affordable electricity from people who at the time certainly had maybe no idea what that would become. As your city clerk, I will be respectful to the community. I will actively seek to reach out to today's younger generation. I will immediately seek to implement multicultural and multilingual outreach. And I will be accessible to each of you for whatever issues you have. It's not simply just elections. It's also bid openings. It's recruiting people to serve on boards and commissions. And it's having a transparent office of the city clerk in the city so that everybody connected with Santa Clara feels confident and excited to live here. Thank you very much, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Haggag.
When we talk about making democracy work for everyone, I don't just talk the talk, but I walk the walk. What I promise to you as your next city clerk is that I will better engage residents using modern technology for more effective information sharing. I will host monthly open mic public town hall, community town hall meetings with city officials on the issues that you as residents care about and will vote on. I'll continue to champion transparency with professional live streaming of city meetings and events and expand that so more people have accessibility to what's happening at City Hall, and we can really shed a light and be fully transparent over what's happening at City Hall. And I will uphold clean money in city business by using my authority as a clerk to enforce the lobbyist and dark money ordinances. I'm proud to have the endorsements of Congressman Ro Khanna, State Senator Bob Wachowski, State Assembly Member Kansen Chu, Mayor Lisa Gilmore, Vice Mayor Kathy Watanabe, Council Members Teresa O'Neill and Debbie Davis, and the South Bay Labor Council, Santa Clara Police Officers Association, the Santa Clara Firefighters Local 1171. I'm here to fight for you. I have been doing that for the last several years. City Hall should work for everyone, not just the select few, and my job will to foster an inclusive environment that guarantees everyone a seat at the table to have their voices heard. And as the famous Shirley Chisholm said, if you don't get a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. I'd be honored to earn your vote on November 6th. Vote Hussam Haggag for Santa Clara City Clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you and the League of Women Voters for holding this forum. I'd like to thank you, the public, for listening to me. I hope that I've been able to explain a little about my candidacy and who I am as a person. I pledge to you, if I'm elected, I will fill my duties in a professional manner, honestly, impartially, and inclusive of all Santa Clarans. Please find out more about me at o'keefeforcityclerk.com. My name is Robert O'Keefe, and I'm running for city clerk, and I would be honored by your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. You're exercising your 30 seconds?
Yes, I'm ready to go to work tomorrow. Oh, but I guess I have to wait till after the election. Thank you.
Ms. Roberts. Yes.
Yeah, good. So thank you so much to the League of Women Voters, and thank you to all residents who've come out to listen to us. I hope you've come to understand a little bit more about me. You understand about me that community is very important. I think qualifications are important too. It tells the story of where you've been and what you're capable of. And a little bit of background that I haven't had time to share yet with you is I do have a science degree. I have graduate diplomas in IT, public policy and legal studies, and an MBA from Sydney University. I've had 10 years government experience, as I mentioned, with the Attorney General's Department, with the Australian National Audit Office and the Senate Committee Office. One of my priorities for getting into office when I'm City Clerk would be integrating the role of City Clerk with that of Assistant City Clerk. That division is new and we need to sort that out. I would learn the lessons from the new districting 2018 elections so that next elections, that would be a lot smoother. I'd find the best possible way to communicate with the public, with residents, about elections and the best way to go about that. You need someone with ethics, with leadership, and a willingness to listen to learn. You can find out more about me at peterroberts.com, and I'd be honoured to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDivitt.
I'm Thomas McDevitt. I'm running for City Clerk. The only endorsement that matters is yours. Thank you in advance for your vote for me come this November for the position. City Clerk is in charge of administering the elections. That currently is about it, except for administering the city seal. Everything else you've heard tonight is nice, but it's not what the position's about. You can learn more about me by talking to me about outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This concludes our forum, and I'd like to thank the candidates for being here tonight. I'd also like to thank all of you for being here and the City of Santa Clara for making this venue and space available for us. We hope that you've gotten some information that will help you make some decisions, have gotten to know the candidates a little bit better.
Good job, Tom.
And we believe in the League that it's important for democracy to survive. We need informed and active participants. I do want to point out the League does have some materials. You know, there are 12 ballot measures. The state ballot, there's some really good simple language about what each one of those bond measures, or each one of those ballot measures is all about. Please feel free to come and pick some up here. I also will note that we have a website called Voters Edge California. We have a bookmark here that'll get you right link to it with a lot of information about all the candidates running for office. Thank you very much. And now we're going to quickly
How about
move.
a round of applause for Gloria and the League of Women Voters?
Thank you. Thank you. We're now going to need to very quickly shift over because we have another candidates forum for the mayor's office. Thank you very much.
Good work, guys. Good work.
Welcome to this evening's candidate forum featuring the candidates for mayor for the city of Santa Clara. My name is Gloria Chun-Hu. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters and the moderator for tonight's forum, which is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of San Jose and Santa Clara. With me are my colleagues here in the front, serving as timers and as question sorters. And we want to thank some students from Presentation High School who are helping out too. And as I said to them, they're going to be our future candidates, we hope, for elective office. Word about the League: we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of both women and men. We were established about 100 years ago to promote political responsibility through informed, active participation in government. The League never supports, opposes, or evaluates political candidates or parties. However, our nonpartisan policy, meaning we never support a candidate, does not mean that we don't take positions on issues, and only we will take a position on an issue after careful study. I do want to invite anyone who's interested in government and politics and serving the community to consider joining the League of Women Voters, and we hope you will. Let me say a little bit about tonight's format. The format will be as follows. Each candidate will make a 1-minute opening statement. Next, the candidate will respond to questions from our audience, and I've already got quite some interesting questions. You're a good audience, I have to say that. The questions have been reviewed by our League members, and that is very important, just so that we can remove duplication. We can also remove any inappropriate questions, and also try to put them together. I will, standing here, however, have the opportunity to make the final decision on which questions we asked, and hopefully we will get to as many as possible. In addition to the 1 minute for each question, each candidate has a green card. It is a rebuttal card so that they can add 30 seconds to a response or save it to the end for their closing statement, and they will have a 30-second closing statement. And if you don't use the rebuttal card during the question and answer period, you're welcome to use that as part of your closing. And in the interest of time and decorum, I ask the audience to hold all applause until the very end. And if you haven't already done so, now is a good time to silence your phones. There are 2 candidates running for mayor for the city of Santa Clara, and they are with us tonight at our dais: Anthony Becker and Lisa Gilmore. We are now ready to begin, and we will start with Mr. Becker with your opening statement.
All right. Well, thank you to the League of Women Voters. I'm a lifelong Santa Claran, educated in local schools and earning a BA from the San Jose State University. Our hometown is facing the need for change, for young, fresh ideas, for a new voice, for a new day in our Mission City. The recycled career politicians and political appointees have brought our city to a state of deficit spending, mounting lawsuits, and discordant government. I'm independent and free from any obligations to special interests. I serve only the best interests of Santa Clarans. I want to be your voice for shaping our city's future. As a planning commissioner, I understand the growth necessary the needs necessary to our Santa Clarans. The new development must be inclusive and harmonious with the existing neighborhoods, as well as affordable. As your mayor, I promise to stop the backroom deals and costly unnecessary litigation. I want to work together with our neighboring cities, and I want to create better infrastructure and enhance our entertainment district. Therefore, it's time to elect new leadership for Santa Clara's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore.
Yes, thank you to the League of Women Voters. I'm proud to be mayor in a city that I was born and raised, where I'm raising my children. I was appointed in 2016 when Mayor Jamie Matthews suddenly resigned. What could have been a crisis for our city became a turning point. I've pushed City Hall to be more transparent and fiscally responsible. I've led a council majority to manage our city as sacred duties for our sons, daughters, grandchildren, and for all Santa Clarans. I will continue to stand up for our residents and our neighborhoods against strong special interests, including an NFL team. And I have continued to prioritize our residents' quality of life. I have fought to uphold Measure J, the law that prevents the stadium from using city revenues. I helped stop the sale of the youth soccer park and Eulastack Natural Area, and it would not give them away in a backroom deal. Finally, we are building a strong fiscal foundation for our future. Last year, we put nearly $70 million into our reserves, once depleted during the Great Recession. Santa Clara is headed in the right directions. Please help me continue the positive changes that we've made. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with the general first question. What do you feel is the one or two major challenges or issues facing the city of Santa Clara, and how would you handle those challenges or issues? And we'll start with Ms. Gilmore.
And is this a 1-minute answer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. We have several issues facing the city of Santa Clara, but one is the fiscal management of our city government. We have been challenged in the last couple of years in terms of being transparent, open, seeing where our departments are lacking, and we've found some very loose fiscal management in the city. So I have led a management team, put a management team in place to strengthen every department in the city of Santa Clara to make sure that we're spending taxpayer money and being fiscally responsible on taxpayer money. Another issue that's very important in the community is the massive development and building that's going on in Santa Clara, and the fact that we have been reacting to developments coming forward. Well, what we've done is put a pause on it, and now we are being able to be, we're not reactive, we're acting now. We're setting aside specific plan areas for development. We're taking the needs of the community in mind before we approve anything, and we're making sure that everything is neighborhood friendly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, same question.
Well, I believe that affordable housing is one of the issues I feel. I read a recent article, and it stated that you need 3.7 full-time jobs to afford rent in our county. And I think that isn't fair. I think affordable housing is a major key issue, because this is affordable housing for teachers, police, firefighters. I mean, you name it. This is affordable housing that we got to focus on. The other thing I think we got to focus on is traffic, because I think both things go hand in hand. Traffic and affordable housing, because if you build housing in neighborhoods that are not harmonious, you're going to continue to get traffic. And that's the thing, is I want to start putting the housing where the jobs are. And those are the two major issues I feel in our city right now, besides transparency in our government, is affordable housing and traffic. And those are two issues that I would put forefront at the beginning of my administration.
Thank you. I'm going to sort of combine two questions, and the question is very generally, what do you believe is the role of the mayor, and what qualities would you bring to that office? Okay, we'll start with Mr. Becker.
Well, first off, the mayor's role is just one vote of 7. One vote of 7. It's not, you know, as a mayor, I believe the responsibilities are steering the ship in the right direction for the city, to put the right legislation in place, to work with the city manager, to work with our community developers, to start practicing pretty much what our government preaches. But at the same time, I don't feel the mayor's role is to get majority blocks on the council to buy council seats. I believe that the mayor's role is limited to a ceremonial somewhat role as it's described in our city charter. But I feel the responsibilities are to guide the ship in the right direction. And I feel that if I have that opportunity, I will be the right person to guide our ship and guide our city in the right direction.
Ms. Gilmore.
Thank you. I think the mayor's role is different from a council role, and I've been a council member. When I was appointed mayor, things changed dramatically. You become the political leader of the city, the spokesperson for the city. It's your job to lead and guide the ship in terms of which direction it's going. And I've been very successful in leading a council majority to actually get a lot of things done in Santa Clara in terms of development-friendly neighborhoods, in terms of fiscal responsibility, in terms of transparency, in terms of working together to get things done. If you do not have the ability to work with your fellow council members, you can't get anything done. So the council usually looks to the mayor to provide leadership, and that's what I've done in the last 2 years.
Thank you. A general question, but an interesting one and a good one. If there is just one thing, if there's one major thing you could change in the city of Santa Clara, what would it be and why? Ms. Gilmore.
What would I change? I think that I think that we really need to improve our outreach and community involvement. I think we started on the right path. Now I took the State of the City speeches, instead of having them for the business community at the Chamber of Commerce, I have taken them out to the community. I had 4 of them for the very first time this year, bringing them out to the community, talking about the city, the operations of the city, answering questions from any and all community members for as long as it took while I was there. And what I have found is that Santa Clarans really, really want to be involved, and what we need to change is getting them more involved by giving them the opportunities to get involved. I think what's going on in the federal government has really inspired people to want to be involved in government, and we have to provide them with the avenues to do that. And I don't think we do enough good at that, right? We're not good enough at providing that right now for all these opportunities for people to get involved. So I think more outreach to the community.
Thank you. Mr. Becker.
Well, the thing that I think I would be changing the most is the transparency in our government. And why am I going to do that? Is because I feel that we shouldn't be pushing things off until after the election. Example, the Chamber of Commerce review. I don't think we should be doing that until, I think we should do that now. We shouldn't be pushing this off until after the election. That is something that I would do as a mayor, is I would be more transparent in providing an open government for my people, because honestly, I'm more afraid of all of you in this room than you should be afraid of me.
You mentioned the word transparency, and it's a question that is being asked also by someone in the audience. And the question is this: I've heard a lot about accountability and transparency. Please define for you specifically what each of these mean, and give some specific examples of these: accountability and transparency. And I think it's really asking, what does that mean to you, and how would you respond to the question about having greater accountability and transparency? So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Becker, and then Ms. Gilmore.
Well, I'd like to continue off what I was just saying just a moment ago. I feel that our city has been lacking transparency for the last probably 10 years. I see the unaffordable housing going up, traffic is getting worse. It's everything that the people of Santa Clara don't want. And I've seen that for the last 30 years of my life is in government. People don't want something, but the government goes exactly against what people want. The thing is, I'm going to change that. Why? Because I'm a millennial. I've seen it happen for 30-some years. It's time for that change. And what is my number one thing for transparency is I believe transparency is being open with your people by giving honest answers to your people, not keeping closed-door sessions, not hiding information, not trying to put things past trying to delay votes until after an election. I feel the real transparency in this city is by providing real answers. And like I said, I'm more afraid of you than you should be afraid of me. That's what the transparency of this city is about.
Ms. Gilmore.
Thank you. My entire term as the mayor of Santa Clara has been about transparency. Since I've been mayor of Santa Clara, we have successfully completed the audit of the Stadium Authority, which resulted in 37 findings and money owed to the city. We have also just completed a Chamber of Commerce audit that have found all kinds of mismanagement and malfeasance of public monies. We have enacted a lobbyist ordinance that we never had before in the city of Santa Clara, a calendar ordinance, so you know who all of us are talking to in terms of transparency. And we're the very first city in the United States locally to pass a dark money ordinance. In the 2016 election, we had an anonymous group giving money, so clean elections are very important to me. So those are just examples of how I am looking at transparency and not just talking about it, but actually getting some things done.
I'm going to move to some very specific questions now, and then we'll go back to some more general questions. This is regarding pot shops, marijuana. Pot shops and growing houses, marijuana growing houses, are currently prohibited in the city of Santa Clara. Measure M proposes to change that. Question: do you support Measure M in the November election? Why or why not? And Ms. Gilmore.
Yes, Measure M is not about how many pot shops, or we call it cannabis, in the city of Santa Clara. Measure M is whether or not the citizens would approve a tax if we do allow any cannabis shops in the city of Santa Clara. So it's a tax-related question only. So we put that on the ballot in the event that the citizens, and it's going to be a citizen-driven decision by the city council. We're going to have a lot of outreach on it, whether or not we have as many shops or not in Santa Clara. But if we do, this was our opportunity to raise some money for public safety in the event that it happens. But there's a long outreach program for cannabis, and we're going to listen to our residents. So that will come after the election.
Mr. Becker?
So I'll be honest with everybody in this room. Probably in the last semester of my college, I was working at a cannabis dispensary. And the thing is the cannabis dispensaries, they were charging in San Jose 33% tax on their dispensaries. Thing is, here in Santa Clara, at first I was for the measure. I agreed with it because I believed that we can use the money. But once I started looking at the measure and started reading the dialogue, I felt that this is a scare tactic, and in order to make people think that, oh, it's going to go to police, it's going to go to fire. I honestly think that if we did have this measure and we put it together the right way, that the money should have went to fixing our roads. For example, pot for potholes. That should have been the #1 thing we should have fixed and focused on, honestly. Because if we're going to do and tax something like this, we should use it to the benefit of fixing our infrastructure. And I'm all for police and firefighters and everything in that and what is detailed in the measure. But I just don't trust the way it's written, because look what's happened to San Jose, and now there's even talk with the county deciding to even prohibit marijuana in the entire county.
Follow-up to that question, should marijuana be allowed in the city of Santa Clara, where do you think and how would you comment on where those might be located? Mr. Becker and then Ms. Gilmore.
Well, that's the thing, is the difference between a person who's representing the people and the person who's a voter. I would support cannabis clubs here in the city of Santa Clara, but the thing is I want the voters like you, I want you all to go out and I want you to vote. And the thing is, if you guys vote to legalize or have marijuana dispensaries here or even tax it, the thing is that I would support every decision that you make, no matter what my personal opinion is because I'm working for you, the people. And based off of what Measure M says, I don't agree with it. But I do agree that maybe it should be an opportunity that Santa Clara makes some tax revenue off of the marijuana dispensaries. But at the same time, I will do everything that the people want. Even if the people say no, if the people say yes, I do what you want.
Ms. Gilmore?
Yes, right now we're doing outreach to the community and a study to find out if we end up having any shops in the city of Santa Clara, how many Santa Clara could actually absorb, and whether or not they could be in areas that are obviously away from schools and residential neighborhoods and other types of areas that would not be suitable for this type of activity. So we're not there yet. There's a lot of research and discussion to take place, and huge community outreach that we need to do. So they would probably have to be in isolated areas with public approval.
Next question has to do with the budget for the city of Santa Clara. The budget deficit in Santa Clara is growing at an alarming rate. What major cuts and big ticket items do you propose to make to deal with the budget deficit? Ms. Gilmore and then Mr. Becker.
So, okay. We balanced our budget this year, and we were able to put in $70 million into our reserves. We are now, with our new city management, taking out our budget 5 and 10 years to get a really good idea of what we're doing. We have things under control for the next few years. The pension monies are really what throw us off kilter, but we are trying to find ways to cut our spending and increase our revenues. We have a large project called City Place in Santa Clara that we are going to generate a tremendous amount of revenues, but we balanced our budget in a very conservative way this year. We balanced it without projecting those revenues. So we're working off what we can right now without firing people, laying anybody off, or cutting programs in the city.
Thank you, Mr. Becker.
Well, I would have to disagree with my opponent on that in the beginning, because based on our city manager's projections, we are going to have nothing but deficit spending for 7 years. That's 7 years of deficit spending. And how are you going to start changing that? I say you start cutting all the fat where it needs to be cut. Cut the pork. And the thing is that I believe that we should start increasing our revenues by working with business, by not creating a bunch of fees or taxes. Start working with business to increase our revenues, to put more money in our reserves, rather than just the $70 million. Because think about it, we had surpluses of revenues before 2016, and now we're going to head into deficits for the next 7 years. The thing is that I want to focus on is enhancing that revenue base, because if we don't, like my opponent was saying, the pensions are getting to be an issue, and that is something that I feel that maybe the marijuana tax should have been used towards too, if we put more effort into planning that ballot measure. But when it comes all down to it, the deficit spending, the budget needs to be balanced the right way.
Thank you. We move from the budget to a very specific question about housing. And the concern is, do you support the provision of public housing for new city employees and other folks who work in the city of Santa Clara but cannot afford market rate housing? And I would urge you to say, not only do you support it and answer that, but why or why not? Mr. Becker and then Ms. Gilmore.
All right, well, first, I would like to support this, but at the same time, I question a lot about, these are city employees who are getting really big salaries from the city of Santa Clara. For example, our city manager is getting a package of $700,000 and her 2 assistants at $600,000. That's wasteful spending. That is too much money. At the same time, I feel that we can have more appropriate, affordable housing for people like public workers from the city that are of lower wages. At the same time, I think about where's your Starbucks workers going to live, where's your grocery store clerks going to live. I think those are bigger issues that we need to start worrying about rather than just the city employees, because honestly, I applied for a job about a year ago for the city of Santa Clara for an entry-level job. It was $72,000 for entry-level. That's too much money, and I think they can actually afford the housing around here, most of it from what I've heard from some of the city employees.
Ms. Gilmore.
Okay. The city of Santa Clara, we've done a lot in terms of trying to provide affordable housing, not only for the residents in the area that no one can afford to live here, but also looking at workforce housing as a potential option. We have asked developers to volunteer when they didn't have to set aside 10% of their units when they build them in the city for affordable housing. It's resulted in a lot of affordable units. We're putting, we're streamlining the process for the ADUs units, the units, so that people can build these units in the back of their properties, dwelling units, so that they can maybe house some workforce housing people. We've created some community supported with different levels, mix of financial, income housing projects like the one we're putting up on Santa Mas Expressway and Monroe Street. We understand the need for affordable housing. Our city employees have a hard time working here, and most of them travel in from out of the area.
Moving from housing, the next question has to do with street parking. Do you support the removal of street parking on the El Camino Real? Not after the completion of the ECR specific plan, which could be years from now, but would you support it before the repaving next year? Ms. Gilmore and then Mr. Becker.
I'm having a difficult time with removing any parking at this point until we have a transportation system that actually makes sense and that people actually use, because the reality is now that people are still using their cars, they're in their cars. So when we can increase the transportation opportunities on the El Camino Real to have them go, the buses and trains and light rails and everything go where we want to go, when we want to go, and consistent for when we want to be there. Until then, people are going to be in their cars. So when we increase the transportation opportunities, then I will look at taking away parking, because what it'll do is push the parking into the single-family neighborhoods, and that will not be good. They're already stressed.
Mr. Becker.
Well, that's something in San Jose that I've noticed is that if you go visit somebody, a friend, or in San Jose, you oftentimes drive around the block about 9, 10 times trying to find a parking spot. The thing is, I agree with my opponent on this, is I don't want to lose parking. But at the same time, we do need to come up with better modes of transportation. And on the El Camino Real, that is a major corridor. I believe it needs a bike lane, but at the same time, I believe we can't lose the parking because it is going to overflow into our neighborhoods, and it's going to put more strain on these neighborhoods, and then we're going to continue to get complaints here at City Hall. So my basic principle in this is I feel that we just need to continue to come up with a better progressive transportation plan that's going to be mostly like a master plan and focus on the development of other forms of transportation, and at the same time taking into consideration of putting bike lanes on El Camino Real, and at the same time not eliminate parking that we truly do need in the city.
Okay, let's move away from those specific questions to more about you. I think the audience would like to know more about you. Tell us a little bit more about your work history. Please provide a brief account of your work history and how this has helped to prepare you for being mayor. And related to that is a similar question. What are the life experience qualifications you have to be mayor? So I think they're sort of both related. And we'll start with Mr. Becker and then Ms. Gilmore.
Well, my background is in film. I'm a videographer and a film editor. I work at Create TV in San Jose. I also have another part-time job as a private film editor where I edit film myself. At the same time, I believe my background has prepared me for this role. Why? Because I know how it feels to struggle. I know how it feels to work as hard as you can to graduate college in 14 years on time. And the reason why is because I had to work full-time jobs all throughout those 14 years. Because I had to support myself, I had to make ends meet. And I feel that because the way the role of mayor is, it is only a $2,500 a month salary, or that's your salary per month. And I believe that my preparation for this role has been everything that has come to my life. And I think everything that has happened in my life has prepared me for what I am about to embark on as mayor of Santa Clara. And I think that is a major issue for myself and for the people to take into consideration.
Ms. Gilmore.
Thanks. I started as a Parks and Recreation Commissioner for 10 years. I served on the grand jury, was chair of a committee. I was on the Assessment Appeals Board for the county, a roads commissioner for the county. I'm a real estate broker for 30 some odd years, a businesswoman. I'm a mother of 3. I'm a soccer mom. I'm a swim mom. I cook sometimes, and I'm very involved in the community. I just spent 30-something years volunteering at the Arts and Wine Festival in Santa Clara. Been really, really involved. A council member, and then mayor, appointed mayor. And I'll tell you, all of those things have led me to have the experience necessary to be the mayor of Santa Clara. And believe me, it's not an easy job. And when you are looking at complex contracts and negotiations, remember, the city of Santa Clara is the city. It's also Silicon Valley Power, $1 billion business, and the Stadium Authority, $1 billion asset. So all of the business experience I have, as well as the public agency experience, has led me to where I am today. Thank you.
Great. There's a series of questions that I think have to do with how do we engage more people in government and in politics and the community. So we'll go after them fairly quickly, and we'll just go through them. Diversity. How do you represent the diverse community of Santa Clara? Ms. Gilmore, then Mr. Becker.
And it's just that specific question on diversity, or is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
there are others, but we'll start with diversity. Why don't we make this a 30-second?
Okay, you made it harder. Okay. So I think diversity is including everyone. We had the opportunity to appoint a council member just a few short months ago to diversify our council, and unfortunately 2 council members didn't support that, which was a lost opportunity. If you look at our boards and commissions, we've done major outreach on the boards of commissions to diversify them, and when you take a look at them, you'll see there's a diversity of all kinds of people, thoughts, opinions, and everything else. So I think the major outreach in terms of public engagement, getting people excited about getting involved in Santa Clara is what I've done. Sorry, 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Same question, diversity.
Well, I feel diversity is, we're going to have a change on this council, I believe, in the next probably 4 to 8 years, and that's going to be because we've gone to districts, and I think that's going to increase the diversity. And everyone says, oh, what if it's just another white person? Or for an example, for myself, if I won, well, I'm a gay individual. And the thing is that diversity just doesn't mean the color of your skin. It can mean your class, your gender. It could be anything. And that's what diversity, I believe, means, is just we're a melting pot, and I think that's what we should be doing in the city of Santa Clara, is everyone has those opportunities then.
Thank you. And then turning to another group of people, young voters. How do you think you can best influence young voters? Just 30 seconds, yeah. So that they will take an active part in our democracy. What can you do to influence young voters so that they will take an active part in our democracy? Mr. Becker and then Ms. Gilmore.
Well, this weekend I had an opportunity with my campaign manager and a few of my volunteers to go around Santa Clara University and talk to a bunch of the students, and I never knew the amount of support I would get from them, and mainly it's because a lot of young people are feeling like we were being forgotten, and I feel like we are honestly being forgotten, and by speaking to them, I think the way you connect to them is by actually going and talking to them, knocking on their doors, connecting to them on Facebook and social media. That's how you get people to vote, and by actually speaking up as a young person, I think that's how you do it too.
Okay. Here's a quick question. Many of our residents...
Would you like me to answer?
Oh, I'm sorry,
that's
Ms.
okay.
Gilmore.
Got excited about this question, too. Okay, so I created the Youth Commission in Santa Clara, it's been very successful. In fact, we just had another dinner with them, and they're doing wonderful things. I constantly, as mayor and as a city council member, have gone to the DARE graduations to meet and work with the students there. I invite them to City Hall on a regular basis. I speak to the groups. I have them actually come, have a mock council meeting. I have them sit up here, and we give them questions. I really try to encourage them and make them more enthusiastic about, especially the young girls.
Great, thank you. Okay, who is your role model, or who do you look up to and why? Ms. Gilmore and then Mr. Becker.
I think that there's...
30. We're keeping this to 30, if that's
30
okay.
seconds,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is really a tough one. There's so many people that I look up to, but there's one person that I'm going to be seeing in the next couple weeks, and that's Anita Hill. And I'm going to the YWCA, the luncheon. And I think the reason I looked up to her is that she changed the landscape for women in this country in terms of the harassment laws and other things that have happened at the time. And so I've always had a huge appreciation. She's been a role model for me, and I'm really excited to see her because of what she's done for people like me to be in this position. So I'll say that for now.
Thank you, Mr. Becker.
Well, it's a tie right now, I think, between JFK and Harvey Milk, but I'm going to say Harvey Milk because he gave me the reason to know that I, as a person, depending on whoever I decide to love, I can actually be elected to office. I can actually represent my people. And I believe the other person that was on this dais also, Jamie McLeod, was really a sign for me that if Harvey Milk can do it, if Jamie can do it, I can do it, and I would like to be the next gay representative.
Thank you. This has to do with non-citizens. Many of our residents are not citizens, but they own, well, this will be a 30-second also. I'm trying to get as many questions in because I've got a whole bunch of them. Many of our residents are not citizens. If they own a residence here and they're paying property taxes, shouldn't they be allowed to serve on city commissions? This person says only citizens now can serve on a city commission. Mr. Becker and Ms. Gilmore?
Okay, well, to be honest, don't really know the right answer for this, but I'm gonna give a shot at it. The thing is that I believe that being an undocumented citizen in our country is a very touchy issue right now because you're living in a land that really doesn't consider you.
I don't believe it doesn't say
Oh.
undocumented. It just said residents who are not citizens.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know if that was my mistake. By residents not being citizens, I think you do have to be a resident to be on any commission here. That was the #1 thing that I did when I became a planning commissioner, and I believe anything that we apply for in the city of Santa Clara as an electoral vote, that you have to be a citizen as well or a resident. So I would try to keep it to residents of Santa Clara because that's the people who make the decisions.
Ms. Gilmore,
Yes, I believe that that's in our city charter, that you have to be 18 years old and a registered voter in Santa Clara to serve on our boards and commissions. And if that's the case, in order to change that, I don't know if it's based on a state law. In order to change that, we would have to change the charter of the city and go to a vote of the people to do that. It makes sense. We have so many people that are interested in serving the city. We just don't have enough spaces because of all the outreach and engagement that we've done in the past couple of years. Especially, we have so many people that want to serve as commissioners.
Thank you. I'll go back now to the 1 minute. My timer here is really
I
nudging
know
me here.
she's not looking happy.
Okay. We'll go back to some issues about your own skills. What are the 3 most important skills needed for today's mayor in Santa Clara? We'll start with you, Ms. Gilmore, and then Mr. Becker. 3 most important skills needed today to be mayor in Santa Clara.
So for me, it's based on experience. I have to have the experience to know what I'm reading. There's a tremendous amount of work involved being the mayor of Santa Clara, and there's a tremendous amount of demands on you. So you have to be able to be a quick study, know what you're doing, know what you're talking about with confidence. That's really important. You also have to be able to work collaboratively with your fellow council members and with your staff here at City Hall. We're all a big team, and we have to work together, and that is a skill that's absolutely necessary, and not everybody has that. And the third thing that's most important to me, you need to have political courage to do the right thing, and that's not an easy thing to do, to have that political courage with all the pressures, the stresses, the harassment, everything else that happens to you. You really have to focus on keeping Santa Clara first and doing what's right, and a lot of times that takes some courage.
Mr. Becker?
Well, I'm going to say the 3 things are communication, compromise, and overall leadership. And the reason why I see these things are because you need to communicate right to make the right moves. At the same time, you need to be able to compromise, because if the deal isn't going to happen, you got to make sure that you can actually give in and give your, you can give in, you can make a compromise on that. And then lastly, the leadership role is it's somebody who's going to stand up, who's going to be the voice of the people, and actually not afraid for once to say no means no. If people don't want it, I'm going to vote no on it. That's what I'm here for, is the majority of the people speak. I'm your voice. That's how it is.
Thank you. We have several questions that have to do with sort of ethics and practices. We'll start with this one. What should the council do if any person or any business misuses city funds or in some way cheats the city? And I guess really it's related to the other question is, how would you address any illegal and unethical practices? Mr. Becker, then Ms. Gilmore.
How I would do it is I would investigate anybody who does use city funds inappropriately. I believe using city money is, I think, unethical, and I believe it is something that shouldn't be done by any entity within the city. I would be very transparent on these issues. I would be open and direct to the people about what is being done in their city, and if anything, that would be considered a whistleblower in our government by saying, if things are not fair, I'm going to be the one that's going to let you know.
Ms. Gilmore?
Is this a minute? May I ask? Are we 30 seconds or a minute?
It's a full minute.
A full minute, thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Becker, did you want more time?
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's, I sort of combined 2 questions.
I am.
What should the council do? What should the council do, and the mayor is part of the council, if a person or any business misuses any city funds or cheats the city? It's really asking, how would you address illegal and unethical practices, and what should the council do in that event?
So during my term as mayor, we've had a couple of situations so far. One, we immediately took swift action and ordered audits, and what we really did with the stadium authority was stop the bleeding of the general fund money going towards the operations of the stadium. So we took swift and certain action. We're putting all those 37 audit recommendations in place, including the way city employees bill for their time, which they had no process to bill for their time in the past. We've had some recent situations with the Chamber of Commerce and some information about public funds that have been mismanaged, and we took some swift action to stop that immediately, because it's important that the council be responsible for the public. We're the last line of defense for the public. We're the stewards of the public funds in this city, and when we find out that there's a problem, we don't ignore it, we don't set it aside, we don't look the other way. In my leadership here as mayor, we take swift action. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question has to do with the relationships on the city council, and the question is, what can be done to heal the discord and help the council to function more collegially? Ms. Gilmore, then Mr. Becker.
Thank you. I think that our city council has been criticized, and we are not unlike other councils in the area. You'll have a council where you will have a majority on an issue and a minority on the issue, and usually those in the minority complain about those in the majority. That happens in Santa Clara, that happens in San Jose, where you have labor and chamber. That happens in pretty much every city council, and that's called democracy. On our city council here in Santa Clara, we have some members that complain about a lot of things. But the majority is a working majority, and we get things done. I'm not always in the majority either. And there's not a particular item, probably minus some 49er and Stadium Authority items, but the city of Santa, we actually get things done and work well together. But keep in mind, you're always going to have a majority, and you're always going to have a minority. I was in the minority of the city council when Jamie Matthews was mayor. I was in a minority, but I still got things done. I stopped the sale of the soccer park. Thank you.
Mr. Becker?
Well, I feel how you solve the problem is you elect new leadership in this role. That's how you fix the problem. If I'm elected to this role, I'm going to be able to compromise with other council members who might object to me. And the reason why is because it's going to take somebody from the middle, somebody from the outside, that's going to actually take a chance and bring the city to a real transparent moment that everyone wants to talk about. And the thing is that I feel that if I'm in this leadership role, that it's going to be a way for me to communicate with my council members, to bridge a divide, because what's going to happen is we'll see a change, is a new generation is in town, and we are the next generation that's going to lead this city. And I feel that, as any young millennial does, that we want a piece of planning our future. And I feel that if I am elected to this role, that I can mend the divide in our city by working with those who might oppose me, because I might actually agree with them. And the thing is, you actually got to sit down and communicate, because I think it's a failure to communicate on our council.
Thank you. Arts District. Do you support an arts district in Santa Clara? And if so, what form should it take? Mr. Becker, then Ms. Gilmore.
I absolutely support an arts district. As a filmmaker, I worked many times with a lot of artists around the Bay Area, and they are all striving for somewhere to take off. They're all hungry for an opportunity, and throughout working through Creativity, I go to a lot of functions where I'm filming a lot of artists premiering their work. And the thing is they need a place to really flourish, and I think Santa Clara has that opportunity. I mean, we already started with the Triton Museum across the street. We can take that to a next level. I think we have a perfect opportunity in our entertainment district to expand on this, or even if we do design a new downtown, this could be an opportunity within our downtown. I feel arts are a very important subject within our city, and it should be taken seriously because everybody needs a little art in their life.
Ms. Gilmore?
Thank you. We just opened Franklin Street a couple of weeks ago at Santa Clara University, and one of the key elements of that Franklin Street is the Art and Art History Building at Santa Clara University, which is going to be a wonderful community asset for the public to go to. We also have the Triton Museum, which I think is really underutilized, and we're looking for ways now to really expand the opportunities there at the Triton Museum. It's a beautiful building on a wonderful piece of property. What my opponent may not know is that we approved the City Place development, and in the City Place development, in North Santa Clara, there's an art district there, which we're going to have museums, entertainment, theaters, everything. It's going to be a phenomenal district out on the north side. So I think that Santa Clara is now with our cultural commission providing art and entertainment for us, that we're really on the verge of really exploding on the art scene here.
Got two more last questions. I'm going to try to fit them in by making this one a 30-second response. Do you support moving ranked choice voting back onto the city agenda? Ms. Gilmore, then Mr. Becker. 30 seconds.
It's not a matter of moving it onto the city agenda. It's a matter of moving it to the voters of Santa Clara. Santa Clara turned down the 2 districts, and for various reasons, I understand that. So ranked choice voting was one of the opportunities with districting in Santa Clara to really diversify our council based upon the experts' opinion, Dr. Gobelet's opinion, that we would have Asian candidates and a Hispanic candidate within the next few years if we had the 2 districts with ranked choice voting. The voters turned that down, I understand that, so we're looking for another, Santa Clara solution.
Thank you. Mr. Becker?
Can you repeat the question again?
Do you support moving ranked choice voting back onto the city agenda?
I don't believe moving it back onto the city's agenda. I think this is, once again, my opponent even said it, which is this should be decided by the people. Yet Measure A this year in June was defeated, and it was based on 2 districts and ranked choice voting. And I think that's what was the real major problem with Measure A, was it was confusing to people to have to choose between ranked choice voting and districts. I think it should have been 2 separate issues that people could have voted on. But I feel that ranked choice voting is a good solution, but currently we should have the voters decide on this.
Thank you. We'll finish with the 1-minute question. The 49ers, big part of Santa Clara City finances. Please characterize our current relationship with the 49ers. Are the current contracts paying for the stadium expenses, and how can we get more benefit from having the stadium in our city? Mr. Becker and then Ms. Gilmore.
Right, well, I feel the relationship between the 49ers and the city of Santa Clara has soured since the Super Bowl. It has soured also since my opponent has taken office. At the same time, my opponent supported Measure J, supported the 49ers, and got all of us to vote for it. We need somebody now that's going to stand in this position and make things right, that's going to work with the 49ers, that's going to work with the residents from the north side. Because honestly, when I voted for Measure J in 2010, I did not think it was going to create the mess that it's in right now. And the thing is that I feel, as recently of the recent arbitration, the 1% is not a victory. We could have got 10% from that arbitration. It says it in the contracts. We could have got 10%. And the thing is that my opponent considers this a victory when really I feel this is a failure, because everybody is considering Santa Clara to be a very toxic place. And right now with the stadium, nobody wants to do business with us. And I'm going to change that if I'm elected mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore?
Yes, so the reality is this 49ers are not easy to work with. And if they do the right thing, we'll fully cooperate with them. So that being said, I was a proponent for the stadium and worked to have it passed. But what I did find was that there were a lot of promises that were made when they were campaigning for the stadium, because I made a lot of those promises when I was supporting it. And when they started breaking the promises, I realized that they are not being honest and transparent with the city of Santa Clara. So things like they refuse to turn over financial documents so that we can determine actually how much money we're making from some of the events. We're just starting to get that in now. They refused to cooperate with the Measure J audit. They knew we were in violation of using general fund money. They tried to take the youth soccer park away and reneged on promises to provide soccer fields for the community. They closed the Creek Trail when they promised to keep it open during game days. We've recently been informed that they have no intention of providing us a community room that they promised as well.
Thank you. Well, we have come, there's a rebuttal card. Oh,
Yes.
Someone's using the rebuttal card. Mr. Becker.
So the thing is that my opponent
30
sits here and
seconds.
talks about the transparency of this and trying to figure out the problems is she's had 8 years to do this. 8 years. Why all of a sudden, as soon as she became mayor, she decides to do some action? Thing is also, it was promised $26 million for our schools in the Measure J campaign. That is false. I think what happened was we were fed a bunch of lies, and now we're faced with the truth, and people are trying to cover the truth up. The thing is now we need new leadership that's going to bring out the right truth about Measure J.
Okay, there's not another rebuttal, in which case it is time for our closing statements, and we'll start with, since we started with Mr. Becker, we'll start with Ms. Gilmore and then Mr. Becker. It's 1 minute unless, but Ms. has a 30-second card, so it'll be 90 seconds and.
Oh, I have 90?
I'm
I
sorry,
thought it was
no,
a
I'm sorry.
30-second closing.
You're right, 30-second close, so it's 1 minute. But
I
you're
read the
using-
rules.
She's
I
using
read
a
the
rebuttal
rules.
card, so you've got that extra 30 seconds.
I did read them. Okay. Mr. Becker, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. These are some of the facts that the voters should know about. We added $70 million to our reserves last year to make up for the Great Recession. Now we're taking the management of the stadium seriously. We stopped the bleeding of general fund money to the stadium operations with violated Measure J. We won a $180 million arbitration with the 49ers, and now we will pay down the stadium debt at a rapid pace so we won't end up like cities like Oakland. We created the first dark money ordinance for real political reform because we want clean elections in Santa Clara. Developers now pay extra fees for affordable housing, traffic improvements, parks, and schools. Our parks and open spaces are now protected. There will be no sale of city parkland, including the youth soccer park or Eulestack Natural Area, without a vote of the people. The state of the city now takes place in neighborhoods for the first time to allow for greater transparency of operations and increased citizen engagement. We are headed in the right direction. I hope you'll help me continue the positive changes. Thank you.
Mr. Becker?
All right, well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters tonight, but I'm going to start off with this campaign for myself and my opponent is a job application. And you, the people, are the interviewers, and it's up to you to select the best candidate, because sometimes the best candidate isn't the typical candidate. There are no strings on me. I am beholden to no one but Santa Clarans and the people. The future still can be written, and it is not set in stone. We can seal the deal. So I'm asking you, when's the last time Santa Clara had a hero? Vote for me. On November 6th, vote for Becker. www.beckerformayor2018.com. I'd love to get all of your support, and thank you again.
Thank you. Well, this concludes our forum. I'd like to thank both participants, candidates for participating.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the volunteers who made this possible, and also the City of Santa Clara for providing this venue. November 6th is Election Day. Get out there and vote. We hope tonight has given you a little bit more insight into the two candidates for Mayor of the City of Santa Clara. And I also do want to mention, if you didn't hear already, that the League has something